The UK newspaper phone hacking scandal has put the business of news in the spotlight across the world. It has raised the same old questions about the practice of news gathering and the fluid dynamic between editorial integrity and profitable business. Will the inquiry into this scandal result in a new code of conduct? Let's find out. But first, Gurbir Singh, you spoke with Rupert Murdoch when he was in India in May 2008. So did I. But I want you to quickly give me a perspective on his, sort of frustration with the fact that he could not and has not been able to breach the regulatory barriers into getting into the Indian newspaper market.
Well, what Rupert Murdoch basically said was that news flow is international, it's across boundaries, and there should be no reason why one country should put up regulation. And he was very, very angry that everything else the government was opening up, and yet on news there was this slamming down. And 2004, Murdoch was forced to liquidate his shareholding, go back to 26% in Star News, and give 74% to the ABP Group. And at the end of that, he was hoping that at some stage this regulation would change back to be him able to hold about 51 or a little more maybe.
So with what has just happened, do you see this policy not changing for a long time? And that is positive, that is something that Indian media owners will look at very positively, isn't it?
Look at it this way. He obviously did not have the foresight that all this would happen. And look at it another way, that for him, with not getting into news, he actually firewalled himself from all these problems. So actually his entertainment market is fairly secure in India.
And it's a very, very big
and it's very large. Just to give an idea, it is the size of News International. Today, Star's turnover in India is about the size of News International,
which is $1 billion,
which is close to $1 billion. It's little less than say 800 or 850 million dollars, which is the size of News International. So in that sense, he must be thanking his stars that at least his Asia operations, because the ditto goes for China. China also is not allowed news. So at least in this part of the globe, he's fairly firewalled against all that is happening in the UK.
Right. Margaret Heffernan, the interesting thing is that one of, collateral damage for the Murdoch empire is that they've now withdrawn that bid for BSkyB going forward. For not the bid to control BSkyB, because they already have a stake in it, substantial stake in it. The question is, the newspaper business is really a personal passion for Rupert Murdoch and about influence and clout more than revenues and business, isn't it? Would you agree?
I absolutely would agree, and I think it's characterized Murdoch's investment and commitment to British media. This passion for newspapers, and I think we find him kind of floundering, not least because newspaper consumption is falling. The younger generation on the whole is not reading newspapers. News Corporation has been trying for 15 years to figure out its internet strategy. I remember trying to do a deal with them with one of my companies about 10 years ago. They didn't really know what they were doing then. I'm not quite sure they know what they're doing now. They clearly didn't know what they were doing with MySpace. And so I think, they're at a bit of a strategic crossroads. Are they going to continue to be a company that with a significant political power base, or are they going to be contented to be a fantastically profitable, hugely popular provider of entertainment?
Right. Meghnad Desai, do you think that the bid for BSkyB is permanently, off now, or is it just something that has got deferred as a result of what's happening?
I think it's off now. I don't think he'll revive it. The only way he could revive it by getting somebody else to buy him out completely and then buy that company, which is also possible. No, I think now the BSkyB thing cannot be revived, because much more has happened even since he withdrew the bid, not all that many days ago. I mean, more and more stuff is coming out about the practices of News International, and that would raise questions about what we call the fit and proper criterion. Why he wants to own 100% of BSkyB is beyond me, because he owns sufficient amount to be able to control BSkyB, but apparently he must clearly fancy total ownership.
You think that the bid is going to come back, right?
I think they'd wait for the controversy to die down, and don't be surprised if 1 year later, I think they creep back into the reckoning. In any case, as Dr. Desai said, they already control 31%. And if you see how the bidding has kind of progressed, it's inched up to a level which I think makes the whole bid unsustainable. And I think they've used this occasion to really pull the plug on the deal for the time being.
Right.
And I'd be dead sure that they'd come back.
And it's going to be quite a setback because it was supposed to be the big crowning piece of their corporate work in 2011.
And this was James's baby, don't forget. But it also means that they'd have to use up about 12 billion of cash that's on their books, plus take on 2 more billion of debt. I think they'd rather wait for the price to come to a more realistic level and move back in.
Let's broaden the scope of this conversation a bit. I want to talk about the judicial inquiry that has been constituted. Interestingly, it has now been, it's not just about this particular incident, but it is supposed to look into what broadcasters and social media do as well in terms of their relationship and conduct with the media, contacts between the press and the police, the extent to which the current policy and regulatory framework has failed in relation to data protection. Meghnad Desai, give us a sense of how these kind of judicial inquiries proceed in the UK, because that's something I think in India we draw lessons from.
See, but this is a very big inquiry. First part of it, the problem is because the police inquiry going on at the same time in phone hacking and so on, some of the witnesses may not be able to testify in public. They may have to testify in private because otherwise they incriminate themselves in law. So this inquiry will take a long time, take about a year and a half, maybe 2 years. They've got Shami Chakravarti, who's a very doughty champion of human rights. And so that will happen. But I think the whole inquiry will be, a lot of it will be in public. And Ed Miliband has said that he doesn't mind if Tony Blair and Gordon Brown have to testify under oath. I mean, there are no barriers to who is called before this committee. And even Cameron may be called before the committee for all I know. That is what India has to learn, that nobody is above the law.
Gurpreet, quickly, you know, we had the paid media story that broke in 2009. We know the Press Council of India has made some recommendations. We know there's a government ministerial panel. Nothing comes out of it. We know the Radia tape, Indrajit is smiling. We know the Radia tapes. The PAC has one very controversial report that, you know, some people have backed off from. Are there lessons here? Because the problems are the same. The issues that come up are the same. But will the UK probably be faster in self-regulating as a result, or UK media as a result of what has happened? And are we very, very lax on this front here?
What's very obvious is it's enveloped all aspects of UK society. British society is completely sort of caught up with this whole debate, and I think the inquiry will be very thorough. And the second part of it, which is the ethics, the second committee which has been set up at the Commons, is going to take that up very seriously, and I think it's going to have a fair amount of ramification.
What about the fact that in India we don't seem to make headway?
We come to that. So therefore, because Murdoch and his empire had enveloped large sections of the political class also, so that's why it's very serious there. In our case, generally inquiries die away, people have very short memories, and usually when it does come out, it doesn't have an impact. But I just want to put up a caveat, which is that the issues are different. Here you have aggressive investigation getting into the privacy of people.
Becoming illegal activities.
Crossing the bounds of legality and becoming illegal. On the other hand, in India, you see, we have a problem of lack of investigation. You're talking of a media boom only in the last 5 to 7 years, where suddenly media has opened up.
And yet a lot of people would say, while there was some public interest that was served, the phone tapping and the revelations of the phone tapping
it was
in the
not really, it was not
illegal.
It was illegal. Well, it's a grey area because it was authorized. In the case of income tax, it was authorized. But it was not in line with investigation. There was no investigation by media into wrongdoing or into scams. It was various agencies trying to find out about other scams being indulged in by the political class, by Raja or whoever it is.
Yeah, we won't go into the intentions of that. But Indrajit, lessons we want to add to what Gurpreet said?
I think in India too, I think there are larger questions about the cozy relationship that politicians have with media and the cops have with media, and we know that. But seldom do we have, as media, taken a united stand. I don't know, Gurpreet is here and he kind of heads the press club as well. He'd know this. I mean, it's very rare that we come together and jointly, I think...
Will there be greater self-regulation? Because otherwise, you know, is the public going to...
It's thrown up interesting issues. I think media in India is being forced to think because of all this. But at the same time, one must realize what Indrajit was also saying, is that there's very little introspection in media. It is fairly new. It's fairly new, so that's a problem. And most of all, the question of real investigation has not. You see, these issues in the UK are coming up because there is a question of real investigation. There is no real investigation.
Right.
Like the recent J-Day case,
right,
which everybody is very well aware of. The police were leaking stories which were being taken down by crime reporters as stenographers. They were not doing any investigation.
Okay, Gurbir, I'm running out of time. Margaret Heffernan, one last question to you, and that is, what would be the ideal result of this really, really big scandal and the cleanup process that you think we should see?
Well, I would say there are two, really. The first is that there is no organization, there should not be any organization in the country, any corporation that believes itself somehow to be above the law. That should be obvious. It wasn't obvious, and it's great that it's been reasserted. And I think, you know, the other takeaway is the great investigations in the history of journalism didn't break laws. You don't need to do this to have a vibrant, exciting, democratic media. You do have to have bodies and a public expectation of high levels of integrity, truthfulness, and fact-checking. And I think that just got completely overlooked. You know, the willful blindness of politicians and the public alike has been extreme.
Meghnad Desai, what happens next?
What happens next is a huge transformation and change in the way we do things in the media, politicians, interrelationships, and the media, police interrelationships. And at the end of this, UK politics would be cleaner and better than it has been. And remember, the scandal was broken by Guardian, which is a boring, non-tabloid newspaper, and its investigative journalism finally broke Murdoch. That is a great David and Goliath story.
The supreme irony, I thought, when I was hearing Rebecca Brooks depose before that select committee of members of parliament, was that all the news that really mattered to her or was of substantive interest to her came to her from the New York Times and the Guardian. I think that's the supreme irony, isn't it?
The Guardian has really played a fantastic role in this, and a lot of people feel vindicated because Rupert Murdoch had more or less destroyed the left of the political spectrum by his newspapers, and the left of the political spectrum has now bitten back.
What is the impact you think this will have on News Corp, especially you know, in the US? Because will there be will this spread?
The crucial test will be whether this contagion is going to spread to the US. That's most crucial because probably 70–75% of Murdoch's empire is in the US. And the first few meetings have now been held with the FBI trying to lay down the line to how investigation will proceed into alleged phone hacking by NOW into accounts of the US victims of the Iraqi war and so on. Now, if that throws up certain details and that if that has violated US law, then it's going to have a crucial impact on Murdoch's business stakes in the US. And that will be really hurtful.
Right.
Because in the UK, I think it's sizably less.
All right, Indrajit Gupta, last words to you.
One is that I think we need to look at the political context of this and the fact that News Corp and Murdoch has been always perceived as an outsider in UK society. And this is one opportunity in some ways for the establishment to get back. The other is that let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think there is still space for tabloid journalism, not of this kind, where you just dole out a recipe of sensationalism. But don't forget, when the mainstream papers decide to focus on globalization and what's happening in Afghanistan, there are tabloids that focus on real issues at the civic level, which are important. And they have certainly a role to play. So I guess it's about finding your space and your right space in society and playing that role well. So it's back to good journalism at the end of the day.
All right. So for anyone interested in the business and ethics of news, this has been a remarkable week. There'll be a lot more questions that are raised over the coming weeks. The answers may be slower coming in, but will be of critical importance to the way we bring you the news. Thank you, Indrajit Gupta, Gurbir Singh, Margaret Heffernan and Meghnad Desai. And thank you for watching.